I mean, we don't get a lot of bluegrass up in South Dakota. They're a little bit too stiff for that. So I got to come down to the South and hear something like that, and I enjoyed it. That's good stuff. I just have to say it's been a blessing to be here today, and man, y'all really lean left here, don't you? Just following the leadership of your pastor. So actually, to you, it's right. So but I'm standing here. It looks left to me. So I'll just kind of move the pulpit over and preach mostly to these. Either that or these over here really need it. So I don't know. It's been a blessing. I really enjoy it. I mean, that special was just an indicator of how good the day's been. It's been a great day, and enjoy the music here. The choir special this morning. That upright bass. That's just. I'm sitting here on the front row. I can just feel it kind of going through me, and I'm like, man, I like it. It's better than that. Better coming right out of that than through a speaker at you. It just feels different. I love it. It was great, and the choir special this morning, and just everything. It's been great. Yeah, y'all are blessed with some really good piano players here, and Miss Alyssa and Miss Caitlin. And boy, we'd love to have a couple of those up in South Dakota. I'm telling you, don't take that for granted. I know there's some others too. Now, your song leader, I had him in class. How many years ago? Yeah, we need a refresher course. It's just like it was in class, Brother Zach. Your pattern's too small. Your downbeat needs to be lower, and you just need more energy. I mean, could you do that? Okay. I mean, every week we labored on this stuff for Brother Zach, and no, I'm kidding. He's doing a great job. And yeah, it was at the youth conference. He was saying something about not leading songs well. He's doing a great job. I'm telling you, y'all are blessed. Your pastor and his wife, Brother Zach and Miss Caitlin. I mean, just don't take that for granted. It's been a blessing and joy to watch them, and they did a great job at the youth conference. They've hosted our family really well. We feel spoiled. We've been to Andy's 3 times since we got into Springfield. Actually, the first night over in Joplin, we sent the kids, and they went and picked some up. Then we got here, and then last night we went out to eat with the East Steps and the Deckers, and then we went to Andy's. This afternoon, we went to get some cashew chicken, which you've got to do when you're in Springfield. And then we went to Andy's to top it off. I mean, it's just going to be we're going to have to go on a fast after this. But we don't get Andy's up there either. I mean, it really is a special treat. Y'all have treated us so well. The hotel's great. The basket, we really appreciate it. It's good to see some familiar faces here. Brother Joyce, you and your wife, him and the Joyces came through there in Stillwater at least a couple of times while I was there as music director for years, and it's good to see them. And Brother Decker and I have been I've wanted to get to know him for a long time. He has gotten to know my dad and my brother a lot more than we've been able to get together, and it hasn't let me down. I've enjoyed the fellowship, and Brother Decker, I appreciate you and the friendship already that's forming there. And I just want to say again, don't take for granted what God's blessed you with in the form of a pastor like that. And God's got great things ahead for South Campbell Avenue, and I hope that you'll be a part of it and continue to be faithful, because there's a lot of good things here, and I'm excited about the future here. Let's turn in our Bibles. This will be a little bit easier to find than Haggai. We're going to go to John. And I was going to do another minor prophet, but the wheels were turning so fast this morning. Smoke was coming out of your ears, trying to find it. And it kind of reminded me a little bit, no, I've never seen choir mics like this. Do they come down? I mean, I was imagining a little squirrel up there turning a wheel, and they come down, and then he turns around and goes the other way, and they go up. I don't know why, just because I'm weird like that. I have a strange imagination, but can you just put him down one time just so I can see it real quick? And then right back up. Look at that. He's like, can you just imagine? Okay, that's fine. You can turn it now the other way. And now they're going up. See? I can hear him breathing hard. Okay. It's just too much Andes, okay? Okay, John 11 is where we're going to be. John 11, when you find it, let's stand John chapter 11, and we'll be at verse 1. Start reading in verse 1. Coming up on Easter next week, Resurrection Sunday, and today is technically what many would call Palm Sunday. But this is an important week, and I felt led to bring this message, not because it's an Easter message, but it does deal with the resurrection and the resurrection of Lazarus. So and I know it's a text that you're familiar with, but there's a principle, there's a point in here that I really want to convey tonight, and it felt like the Lord would have me do this. John 11, verse 1, it says, "Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick." When Jesus heard that, and this is where it just kind of starts to make you wonder, because Jesus Christ's response to the news is different than what you would think it would be. Look at verse 4 again. When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And when he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Then after that, saith he to his disciples, "Let us go into Judea again." And his disciples say unto him, "Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again?" And Jesus answers that. Look down at verse 11. "These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go that we may die with him." And this text is one of, there's kind of two things going on. You've got obviously Lazarus, and he's sick unto death, and he's so sick that he dies. Then you've got Jesus responding in a way that you don't really anticipate him responding. And then you have everybody else in this text that isn't getting it. They're not seeing what Jesus wants to do. And there's an important point that I want to make tonight, that sometimes Jesus Christ, the Lord allows us to go through things when we want to go around things. And he's got bigger lessons to teach us, and I hope this will be a help to us tonight, to you, not around, but through. That's the title. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. I pray that you'd bless it. Pray that you'd help our minds and hearts to be open. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. You may be seated. In 1980, there was a lady named Rosie Ruiz. Does anybody recognize the name Rosie Ruiz? Okay, so we've got somebody that recognizes it. Rosie was declared the winner of the Boston Marathon with a time of just under 2 hours and 32 minutes, which at that time would have been a female Boston Marathon record. She was celebrated. 2 hours and 32 minutes is quick. It's fast for a marathon, and much less for a lady. She had instant fame. It was heaped on her because she was previously unknown. She came literally just out of nowhere and won the Boston Marathon. But at the same time, doubts also arose. You see, since when she crossed the finish line, she was hardly sweating. She wasn't panting. She wasn't breathing hard at the end of the race. None of the spotters along the Boston Marathon course remember seeing her. None of the other runners remembered seeing her. She wasn't in any photographs. She wasn't in any of the video. And 8 days later, 8 days after she crossed the finish line, she was stripped of her title when it was discovered that she had actually taken a subway from where she was on the course, gotten on the subway, and was dropped off about a half mile before the finish line, and then finished the last half mile of the race. And it spawned a popular t-shirt that read Rosie Ruiz Track Club, and it had a picture of train tracks on it. Sounds like my kind of race, you know? Rosie Ruiz's name will forever be linked with cheating because she took a shortcut. And there's others too. You think about Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds in the late 1990s. Any baseball fans? Probably, are you Cardinals fans around here? Okay, so you're used to winning, okay, usually. I'm a Rangers fan, so I don't have anything to talk about, really. But, if you're a baseball fan, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, late 90s, they went on this home run record hitting pace, and they were breaking records, and it injected life into baseball, only later to find out there was a major drug enhancement scandal going on, and they were cheating. And their names will forever be linked with cheating, and those guys will never be in the Hall of Fame. They probably could have been in the Hall of Fame without the drugs, and yet because of that, they probably never will be. You've got a guy named like Lance Armstrong, who was one of the great road racing cyclists, and he won the Tour de France 7 times before being disqualified in 1999 for performance-enhancing drugs again. And it was concluded in 2012 that he'd used those drugs his entire career. He was named the ringleader of the most sophisticated, these are somebody else's words, the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that sport had ever seen, any sport had ever seen. His name will never be respected again because he took shortcuts rather than doing the work to get through it. And in these cases, the shortcuts gave a short-term advantage, but they gave no long-term benefits because they didn't in the end help the legacy of the men that took the shortcuts. And it's a good lesson for us. You think about how if you're trying to get in shape or you're trying to exercise, taking a shortcut, it might feel better in the moment, but it doesn't help you in the end to achieve your goal. In schoolwork, you got a lot of young people in here. In schoolwork, you want to take a shortcut. You might want to even maybe cheat a little bit or copy and paste a little bit, which is way easier now than it would have been when I was in school. I mean, just a copy and paste off a website. It's very easy to do, but I'm telling you, you miss out on the goal of learning, and if you get caught, I'm telling you, it's not worth it, kids. It's human nature, though, to want to avoid the pain and want to avoid the work and want to avoid the difficulty. We'd often rather have easy than best. Mary and Martha and the disciples, they have this lesson to learn in John 11 because Lazarus is very sick, and his sisters, they send a message to Jesus in verse 3, and it's saying, "Behold, he whom thou lovest is sick." And obviously, Jesus has great affection for this family. They say, the one that you love Lazarus. They assumed that by sending this message that Jesus was going to drop everything and respond to their trouble. But it's interesting what he does. He doesn't respond the way that we would think he does. Look at his responses. It's pretty fascinating. Look in verse 4. He says, when Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death." It sounds like Jesus is saying, don't worry, this is not a big deal. Now, if you have children, you may have a child that always has something wrong, or they think they always have something wrong. Any parents like that? You've got a child, it's like every day there's some new ailment. And, they're hypochondriacs as little children, and they're coming, my tummy hurts 5 minutes later, my leg hurts, and 5 minutes later my head hurts, and then pretty soon they haven't gone to bed, it's like 11:30 at night, and there's another ailment coming up, and you just want to say, you're not sick, you're not hurt, go to bed so we can go to bed. Okay, that's kind of the parent response. Well, in a little way, that's kind of what Jesus Christ does. That's kind of how it sounds here. He says, this is not unto death. And that leaves you scratching your head, because was Lazarus' sickness, was it unto death? Did it result in his death? Well, yes. And we know that Jesus Christ means that ultimately that this is not the intention or plan, but it sounds like he almost waves it off. It sounds like he doesn't take it seriously, and it seems like he's downplaying that this is a big deal for Lazarus. We'll get to it later that he's got bigger purposes, but this is kind of a head scratcher that he says this is not a big deal. Look at his second response. Look at verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and when he had heard therefore that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. And that doesn't seem right either, does it? That Jesus Christ, it says that he loved Lazarus, he loved Mary, he loved Martha, but his response, not verbally, but in his actions, he says, I love them, so I'm not going to help them. I love them, but I'm staying here. It seems kind of like the opposite of love to me, doesn't it? I mean, when we think somebody has a serious need and we love them, our reaction is not, well, I'm not going. Our reaction is not to sit down. Moms especially, I mean, if you've got a child that has a need and there's an immediate need and they need you like that, your first move is to go to them. You wouldn't say, I love you so much that I'm not going to help you. I love you, but usually we would say, I love you and I'll be right there. You ever had somebody drop something, drop everything for you in a moment of need? Doesn't it make you feel loved? I mean, maybe you haven't. I have. Had somebody drop something in the middle, just right in the middle of something. They dropped everything for me, and they were expressing their love to me. But that's not always how the Lord works. He doesn't always just drop everything and come and rescue us out of the trial we're in. And this is a good parenting principle. By the way, Jace, a couple years, last year during COVID, we didn't have a lot to do, so he was riding his bike, and we went up to a field behind a church there by our house, and he would ride down the parking lot and build up all the speed he could. And at the end of the parking lot was the grass, and there was a little mound, a little hill built up, and he would hit it, and it was a ramp. And he wanted me to record him, because, everything has to be captured on video these days by the kids. Dad, record me. So he's going down the parking lot. He hits the ramp, and he got serious air. I mean, it was way up there. It was awesome. It was a good jump. But when he landed, he didn't quite understand how to land it. So when he landed, he hit real hard, fell over. His legs got tangled up in the bike. And it did scrape his leg up pretty good. And so he's laying on the ground, and I want to see his reaction. He wants to see my reaction. And he looks over at me, and our natural response would be, oh, Jace, are you okay? But I didn't do that. I was like, good job, buddy. Get up. Let's go do another one. And he didn't cry because I didn't overreact. It's a good parenting principle. If you overreact every time, they're going to assume that you're always going to be there when something goes down and you're going to come rescue them in the moment. And you know what he did? He got up, got on his bike, went back up in the parking lot again and did it again. And the next time he got lots of air and he landed it. So, it's a good parenting principle, but sometimes God doesn't just come and intervene. The Father makes us wait sometimes. And it's a good parenting principle is that we don't need to be helicopter parents. The helicopter parents are always hovering over their children and to rescue them when they have a need. No, there was obviously a bigger reason for Jesus to wait. He loved them, but there was something else he wanted to accomplish. Look at his third response. He and his disciples are talking about Lazarus, and look what he says in verse 14. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I wasn't there. Basically, I'm glad that I was not there. And if that's all you heard from Jesus, you would really start to be questioning whether or not he loves Lazarus. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying from a human standpoint, you're starting to think, does he even love Lazarus? Does he even care about Lazarus? Does he even care about Mary? Does he even care about Martha? And I know he gives her reasons for his actions, but if someone isn't careful, it sounds insensitive. And no one should have to be alone when they're dealing with a difficult trial. This has been a heartache the last year with COVID-19. There are people who are struggling, and I know you've got somebody in your church even right now that's struggling and in the hospital. And it just seems wrong that in the time of your greatest need, there are people this last year that have been sick, but because of COVID, nobody could even be in the room with them. And they're struggling alone. It just seems wrong that should be happening to somebody. You would think that somebody needs to be there and somebody needs to show them love. And you think about this whole situation, and you might scratch your head a little bit, like, what is he doing? This illness doesn't lead to, he's saying this illness doesn't lead to death. Well, it does. He says, I love them, so I'm not going. He says, Lazarus has died. I'm glad I wasn't there. We might think it's insensitive. It sounds almost like he doesn't care, but we read in the same passage that he does. We read that he loves Mary, he loves Martha, he loves Lazarus. So what's going on? Well, obviously, back in verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. That the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So we have to acknowledge that even though it doesn't seem right to us, that Jesus has a bigger plan. He says very plainly, this is for my glory. And as always, we find out he has bigger plans than what we can see. He's got something greater in store, and his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his plans are bigger than what our plans are. And that's why he says in verse 15, I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there, to the intent that ye may believe. He's making something very clear to Mary and Martha and the disciples. He's saying, I'm in control of this circumstance, and I have a bigger plan. So what's his plan? Well, let's read through some of these verses. And if you just try to lock in, and by the time we come around, I think that you'll get the point. He comes to Bethany, where Lazarus has already been buried for 4 days. And look at the responses. Look at how many people don't get what's happening. Start in verse 20. Look what it says. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Lord, if you'd been here, we wouldn't have had to experience this trial. If you'd been here, we could have gone around it. Look at verse 22. She says, but I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. I do appreciate that Martha has faith that if Jesus Christ wants to, he can raise her brother from the dead. She believes in God's power. She knows he can, she just doesn't know if he will. Look at Jesus' response, verse 23. Jesus said unto her, thy brother shall rise again. Well, Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Can't you just see this? Jesus is trying to give her reassurance. Hey, Martha, your brother's going to rise again. And Martha's like, I know in the last day he's going to rise again. I know that's true. You're the resurrection. I know that he's going to rise someday. And Jesus, don't you think Jesus, but no, that's not what I meant. No, I know in the last day you're going to rise again. Well, that's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is trying to get her to see, no, my resurrection power is not just about the future. My resurrection power can make a difference in your life today. And she's not getting it. She doesn't see it. She's got this one-track mind, and she's not seeing what he's trying to say. Look at verse 25. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though we were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? So Jesus comes back and he reminds her, listen, if you've been a witness to power over death, but listen, it's not just about death. My power over death has changed your whole life. The resurrection power of Jesus Christ is not just at the last day. The resurrection of Jesus Christ, power of Jesus Christ has changed us today. It's given us victory over sin. It gives us victory not just over sin, but over death at the end. And listen, we may go through death, or may be raptured out and not have to experience it. But either way, we don't have to experience the same kind of death that those that don't have Christ. And I'm thankful for that truth that Jesus Christ is trying to reassure them, and yet they still aren't getting it. Look down at verse 32. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, same thing Martha said, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Look at verse 33. After this response, Jesus says, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Verse 35, Jesus wept. Jesus is stricken with grief. And there's debate about his reason for crying and groaning, and some believe it was due his sympathy for those that were in the situation and those that were grieving, and that may be part of it. But I believe with all my heart that there's a part of him that's grieved that these people don't have more faith. He's grieved that he's trying to make a point, and he's trying to show them and reveal his power to them, and they're missing it. They're not seeing it. They're almost refusing to listen to what he says. And look at verse 36. It says, "Then said the Jews, behold how he loved him." And they interpret his crying for them as love. They say that's true love right there. They think he proves his love by crying, but his love wants them to grow in their faith. That's more of what true love is. He's not just crying because he's sympathetic. He's crying because they're not getting it, and he wants God to receive the glory, and he wants their faith to be grown. But look down in verse 37. "And some of them said, Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died?" If only Christ was powerful enough to take Lazarus around the obstacle. They still don't get it. They still don't understand. Jesus Christ has the power to do whatever he wants to do, and yet they're even questioning if only this man had the power. I mean, Jesus is grieved that his followers think he's not in control. Look at verse 39. It says, Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto them, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days." Look at verse 40. "Then Jesus saith unto her, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God?" Martha still isn't getting it. I mean, he's literally setting it up. He said, "I'm the resurrection and the life. I have this power. Your brother Lazarus will rise again." He says, "Roll back the stone." And if Martha was listening, she would say, "Oh yeah, here it comes. He's going to come." But she says, "Lord, he stinks. He's been dead 4 days." As if Jesus Christ doesn't know that. She still doesn't get it. And I would be grieved. I mean, listen, I mean, it'd be kind of like if my children, if I was to pick my son up and carry him down to the back of the church, and I've done it many times before, and I go to pick him up, and he's like, "Dad, just wait, that's a long ways. Dad, the last time you tried to pick me up, remember what it did to your back?" Say, "No, son, I'll carry you the whole way. Come on, just jump on my back." And he said, I don't think this is not going to work. That's kind of what's happening here. He's proved himself over and over and over again, and he's getting them ready, and he's setting it all up, and he says, "Roll the stone away." And all they can say is, "He stinks by now." Well, I sure hope he knows how this works. And they're doubting his power. They're doubting the power of the one that they have seen do miracle after miracle after miracle. And we come down to the end of the story, and it's almost anticlimactic because they just don't see it the whole time. Look at verse 41. "Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me." I don't know if he said it like that, but that's how I read it. Father, I thank thee that at least you're listening to what I'm saying, because nobody else is. Look at verse 47 or verse 42. "And I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice." I love these 3 words. "Lazarus, come forth." And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him, and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. And you think, well, that's the ending we were looking for, except look at verse 46. "But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus has done." So everyone there, they watched Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead, and yet they still didn't get it. They saw with their own 2 eyes his power, and yet they still didn't get it. I'm at least thankful that some did, but I just want to take a step back, okay? We're going to start wrapping it up to the application here. Let's just take a step back. I want you to consider what's happening. Hope you're locking in, just because this is important. His people have an obstacle. Lazarus is sick. And in their minds, Jesus would prove his love if he removed the obstacle. Jesus would prove his love if he removed the trial and he just healed Lazarus. Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Lord, if thou hadst been there, my brother had not died. Twice he hears that. But what they were saying is, Lord, if you had been here, we could have taken a shortcut. We could have gone around all of this, Lord, if you had just been here and done what we thought you should. But that's not the way the Lord looks at it. He allows Lazarus to die. Please lock in. He allows Lazarus to die because there's a greater lesson to be learned with Lazarus dying. If he can raise Lazarus from the dead, then it will convince those watching, and many believed it, that would convince many others watching that they can trust him for anything. If Jesus had healed Lazarus, that would have been a miracle. It would have been incredible. And they would have been reminded that Jesus has power over disease. Is that a good thing to know? Is it a good thing to know that Jesus has power over disease? Yes, it is. Absolutely. But listen, there's a greater lesson to be learned. If Jesus had run to Lazarus and removed the obstacle, it would have convinced Mary and Martha and the disciples that he was strong enough to defeat disease. But by allowing them to go through the trial, he convinced them that he was strong enough to defeat death. So if he would have removed the obstacle, they would have all known, oh, Jesus Christ, he can heal any disease we have. But by allowing them to go through the trial, they are now convinced not just that he has power over disease, but that he has power over the ultimate enemy of mankind, which is death. You tell me, which is the better lesson for them to have learned? To go through this trial was what they needed to have more faith. They were looking for a shortcut, but if they had taken one, they would have traded a big lesson for a small lesson. Going around the obstacle is understandable. It's easier, it's quicker, it's less painful, it's human, and we find ourselves saying, take this illness and take this trial and take this financial hardship and give me a shortcut. Take me around. But going around could cause us to miss the lessons we would learn by going through. God is love. But according to this passage, the ultimate expression of love is not to prevent hardship. Love wants what's best. What's best is not always what's easiest, or what's quickest, or what's less painful. Jesus' actions indicate, listen please, Jesus' actions indicate that what's best for them is not the lessons avoided by going around, but the lessons learned by going through. To the intent that ye may believe. You can either have the lesson that Jesus is greater than disease, or you can have the lesson that Jesus is greater than death. What's best for us is growth in our faith. And we don't get that without tough lessons. You don't get stronger without exercise. And you don't get smarter without study. You don't get better without practice. You don't grow with easy. You grow with best. And it's very often that best is also hardest. It's toughest. It's more painful. It brings more tears. It's more of a struggle. And in the end, God desires for us to go through because it increases our confidence in Him. It puts us in a position where we have no wisdom and we have no strength and we have no power. We have nothing left but to turn to Him and be fully dependent on Him. And when we have no hope but in Him, there is no way we can take any of the glory for ourselves. You realize that? The part of the reason that Jesus wants them to go through something like the death of their brother is because they could never take any of the credit for what happened. They had no answer to death. I mean, a disease, somebody could just, their body fight back and be healed of a disease, and they may have given credit somewhere else. But when it comes to death, There's nobody that can receive the glory for victory over death except Jesus Christ himself. They would have had no option to take this credit or glory for themselves, to the intent that we may believe, to the intent that our faith in God's ability has grown, to the intent that he receives all the glory. That's the intention. Be thankful. Listen, we be thankful that we have a Father that loves us enough to take us through in order to get us to our best, rather than always taking us around so we can enjoy what might be easiest. Folks, there are a lot of people facing difficulties. I mean, I'm just to give you some of the kind of phone calls a pastor gets. Job loss. Pastor, I lost my job. Can you pray for us? Pastor, family member has coronavirus. It doesn't look good. Pastor, we have marriage struggles. My wife and I, we really need to meet with you this week. There's my pastor, experiences. Pastor, my husband's moving out. All in the last few months. Pastor, I have a sin addiction and I need some help. Pastor, I've got such fear and anxiety right now over everything happening. Pastor, my finances are in turmoil. Pastor, there's a terminal illness. Pastor, I've got cancer. I'm 21 years old and just got married. And Pastor, my wife, we just got married and yet she has cancer. They just gave her a diagnosis. We start chemo. She literally surgery today. We start chemo this week. Just like that. Pastor, a missionary out of our church. Pastor, we're about to start furlough and about to go back to the field of Africa. And yet my wife was just diagnosed with cancer, Lord. And I don't know what the Lord's going to do with it, but we need your help. We need your prayers. We're not sure what to do. Pastor, our teenager keeps running away in the middle of the night. Pastor, it's a death in the family. Pastor, good, dear family friends, just killed in an accident. Listen, it's hard. Life is difficult. And we have to battle the thought that God doesn't love us just because he hasn't provided a shortcut around the things we're facing. We must remember that God actually proves his love by giving us the grace and the opportunity to grow by taking us through those difficulties. See, the most convincing proof of this principle is how God dealt with our sin through his own Son. See, even Jesus Christ, he's in the garden. He says, Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine. And can you imagine what would have happened to us if Jesus, and I know this couldn't have happened because God's plan from the foundation of the world, but what if Jesus had thought about trials and difficulties like we do? And he's in the garden and he's saying, Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. And he knows the difficulty that lies ahead. And he says, no, I don't really want to go through that. Lord, Father, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go around this. And if he had gone around that, which was an obstacle, what would that have done to us? So what I'm saying to you tonight to give you confidence in your Father is that he's not asking you to do anything that he wasn't willing to do himself with his own Son. He sent his own Son through an obstacle that none of us would have ever wanted to face. He didn't let him go around. It was his will that Jesus Christ bore that cross and walked all the way to Calvary and was hung right there for us. And he had his own Son do it. Listen, it should give us confidence that if he'll have his own Son do it, that he'll give us every grace and every resource and every help to give us the opportunity to go through it ourselves. We have his strength because we have none. We have his grace because we're at the end. We have his wisdom because we have no answers. We have his help because we can't help ourselves. And if he has proven that death, listen, if he's proven that death submits to him, then there's nothing you face this week that he doesn't have power over. There's no obstacle in your life he can't take you through. If he can defeat death, there's nothing that you'll face this week or this year or in your life that he can't help you with. I'd hate to get through a season of faith building, potentially, like we've had the last year, and realized I spent the whole time asking for a shortcut. Rather than asking God for His grace and help to teach me the lessons I needed by going through. What have we missed in our lives seeking a way around when God has intended to teach us lessons by taking us through? We're too often like one of the folks saying, if only he would have gotten here earlier, Lazarus wouldn't have had to die. Well, it's true, but if that had happened, they wouldn't have watched Lazarus walk out of the grave. So which lesson do you think is greater, the easiest or the best? It's through the obstacle, that God grows you. So stop looking for a shortcut. Stop looking for a way around. And instead of praying, Father, change my circumstance, would you pray, Father, change me? If you keep waiting and looking for a way around, you might miss the lesson God wants you to learn by taking you through it. Let's submit to a Father who is looking for His glory, but through His glory, He's also looking for our best. He's got something to teach you by taking you through the trial you're in. And would stop looking for a way around, because He's got something to teach you by taking you through. Let's stand. Every head bowed, every eye closed.